Over the weekend, there was some kind of big news bit about Plants vs. Zombies 3, which I didn't even know there was a third Zombies game to begin with. And at first, I thought this was like a cancellation of the game, cancellation of some kind of major update. But then, upon further inspection, it turns out a fan game was cancelled. And while there was much doom and gloom from the fans and people excited about the project, developers were just shaking their collective heads. So for today's video, we're going to kind of talk about the, I guess, murky relationship there is with fan games and games themselves, and what you need to be aware of if you're thinking about doing your own appreciation of your favorite title. For as long as there's been popular games, there's been fans of said games. And the fan game scene has certainly grown dramatically over the past 20 years, with, of course, the rise of the internet. And there are several reasons why people like to work on fan games. There's a great way to show your appreciation to your favorite IP, favorite characters, do something differently that you would never see the original creators do. And it is a great way to get notice in more ways than one, as we're about to talk about. But whenever we talk about fan games, no matter how good, original, weird, wacky, strange, whatever, there are always potential pitfalls that can befall these teams. So, the first one is a very simple one. No matter how original your game is, no matter how unique, creative, something never before seen, you're still working with someone else's IP. And again, fair use does not cover directly taking IP or copyright images, characters, trademarks, whatever, and sticking them in your own game, whether it is a free game, paid game, or whatever. If you actually rip assets off of an existing title or anything like that, you are playing with a lot of fire. Also, to build off of that, if you name your game after an existing franchise, you are playing with double fire, such as all the Pokemon fan stuff, the Metroid one, and many others. And like I said a few minutes ago, fan games are a great way to give an IP some additional credits or recognition in the space itself. It is an excellent way to do something different. But you see, the problem with fan games is that no matter what you do with them, you are still not working on your own original IP. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that every game developer will tell you about working on a fan game, always have a plan to pivot. I'm not making a Super Mario Brothers style game anymore. I'm making a Super Sam Brothers game. And even if you do everything right, things can still come back to hurt you. A few years ago, I interviewed Katie Houlihan, I believe. She worked on the fan game to King's Quest. This was like 5-6 years ago. I can find the link to it, I'll put it in chat. And during that interview, we talked about the challenges of working on a fan game. Because, again, here is the important point. Even if the IP is completely defunct, even if there are no new games coming, if no one has ever mentioned this IP in decades, it's still owned by someone or corporation. And if they find out about it, well, guess what? It doesn't matter how much original stuff you put into, how much time, money, energy, blood, sweat, and tears. They have the IP and they have ownership over it. And a really good example of a fan game done, at least to keep things above the board, would be Dr. Robotnik's Ring Racers. And I'll include the footage of it somewhere here. And it's okay to mention because it's been yelled at all across social media since it was released. So this is a Sonic fan game built to be a arcade kart racer using GZ Doom or the Doom engine as the foundation for it. And what this game does really well, and again, this is what we kind of want to see on the best case scenarios of a fan game, is that, yes, it is using the original, obviously, IP of Sonic, but it's doing it in a way that is completely different, There is no way, shape, or form that this game could ever be misconstrued as a title from the original developers, especially since it looks like a Sega Saturn game. And of course, they're not naming it Sonic the Hedgehog Racing or Sonic the Hedgehog All-Star Racing Super, Platinum, Uranium, anything like that. And this is something that, again, in this respect, while they are, again, kind of playing with fire, I am sure they have plans. And if Sega decides tomorrow, well, we don't want you to use these characters anymore, that they can certainly change it to something else. And even then, it's been out long enough that everyone has a copy of it. Everyone who is going to have a copy of it has downloaded it. And this, again, is the kind of positive side of a fan game. When it is so original, so different, that it has no real bearings to the main IP, other than, of course, the characters in it. And even then, the use of the characters is more ancillary than anything else. Freedom Planet 1 and 2 would be another good example of this. Freedom Planet originally started out, once again, as a Sonic the Hedgehog fan game. But what ended up happening was, well, they didn't want to get into trouble with Sega with making a 2D Sonic-like platformer, so they changed it around. Now, to bring this back to the whole Plants vs. Zombies 3 debacle, again, if you first look at it, it just sounds like, EA PubCap being mean to a small team. But then you notice some very, very, very major red flags. First off, naming their fan game exactly like the original game. It was called, I think, Plants vs. Zombies 3 What Could Have Been. Yeah, that's definitely strike one. Strike two, using concept art and copyright images in the announcement of their game. That is strike two. And strike three, trying to use all this and, again, make it seem like this was an approved game or an approved fan game, patch, custom, whatever, by the original creators. That is strike three. And again, when we look at fan games, we have seen studios strike down these games for far less, as evident by the myriad of Nintendo-related fan games that, well, they've disappeared, they've gone poof over the past 10 years. And like I said, you can work on fan games in your spare time. If you just want to make a simple little game and use Mario fighting, I don't know, Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins while the Colossus from Shadow of the Colossus is cheering you on, you can do that. But the second you put that online, the second it leaves your local storage, you are opening yourself up to danger. And again, if you announce to everyone that, hey, I'm making this game, I'm using all these different characters and all that, that's also a very bad thing. And again, different developers, different studios will have very different rules for what they accept and what they'll approve of a fan game. Nintendo just says, no, absolutely not. And like I said, this is something that if you are interested in working in this space, you are definitely going to be opening yourself up to a lot of legal liabilities. Even, again, in a case like Ring Racers, where it does not look anything like a Sonic game today. There is no attempt to brand this as a brand new Sonic game. At the end of the day, it's still using Sonic characters. It's still using the Sonic IP. And if you don't have ownership or you're not given the rights to work on, the limited rights, I should say, you are in a little bit of trouble, or should I say a lot of trouble there. Now, the dream scenario in all this is that your fan game becomes so popular or so interested that the creators want you to work on something. And surprise, surprise, that has happened several times in the past. Even with mods. If you remember stuff like the Long War mod, that it originally just started out as this super long project, no pun intended, for XCOM Enemy Unknown. It did so well that it convinced Firaxis to do a full SDK modding support for XCOM 2, and they hired the team to make the Long War mod for XCOM 2 like that. The Sonic game, I forget which one, I think it was Sonic Mania, was created by fans who made little fan games and their own content for Sonic the Hedgehog. And again, I think this is one of those things that a lot of people kind of look at when it comes to working on fan games. That, hey, I really like this project. Let me just keep working with this IP, and maybe the creator will notice me, and then I'll be able to work on my dream game. Again, it sounds all great when we put it down like that, but you are always opening yourself up to risk. If you want to say that you're working on a game that is inspired by Mario, Sonic, Hollow Knight, Castlevania, Metroidvania, anything else that you can think of, go for it. But always be sure that if you're intending to put this out there, you want to protect yourself. And at the end of the day, it's better to say that your game was inspired by the likes of Doom, Shmup, Bullet Hell, Mario, whatever, but not have anything related to that IP. Now, a few of you will probably counter, well, if you're telling me not to use the IP, then what's the point of making the game? Well, the point of the game should be to make a really great homage or spiritual successor. It should be a great reminder of that game. But again, the second you use any copyrighted or trademark elements, you are going to be in trouble, or potentially be in trouble. But the worst thing that you can do would be something like the Plants vs. Zombies example, where you're naming your game after another game, using the trademark images and art on your kind of website, and announcing for everyone to know that, well, we're making this just like what we wanted to see Plants vs. Zombies 3 be. Because here's that other point. Even if the game that you are copying, or you're making a fan game of, is horrible, it's terrible, it's, you want to make the best version of it, you want to fix it in every which way, it's still not yours. And if you try to name it to confuse people, or it sounds similar to that game, you are really going to be causing trouble with it. And I'm sure that EA and PopCap would have been fine if someone decided to make a, I don't know, Fruits versus Gargoyles game, and using its own original art and own original characters, and still being tower defense. But again, even with that, you still have to be very mindful, and there are many routes that you can go as a developer in terms of taking an IP in a different direction, or creating an original IP, I should say, and going in a different direction. So, with all that said, fan games and the whole fan community is a very healthy and vibrant one. It can lead to a lot of surprising designs and concepts that can go viral. But like I said, and like every developer will tell you, you are playing with a lot of fire, no matter how much originality you put into it, how creative it is, and again, even how remotely it is different from that base game. You can make a 2D platformer involving brothers jumping on strange animals, but if you decide to call your game Super Mario Bros. Revival using the same assets, I can tell you that Nintendo has their own army of attack drones aimed at your house as we speak. And when this works out, again, with the likes of Sonic Mania, Ring Racers, and even Mega Man Maker, it does resonate with those developers. It tells them that people do want to play those games. And maybe they'll decide to work on a new one, or they'll decide to work with that team on some kind of appreciation or event. But these are outliers. And for every fan game that does blow up, like we've mentioned, or does make the news, there are dozens, if not hundreds of them that get shut down privately. They get that one little mention on a major website like an IGN or a Polygon or whatever, and then we never hear about them ever again. And it's why, for a lot of us who look at fan games or cover indie games, we know that until a game gets really mentioned, until it is known out there, we don't know anything about it until that happens. So, for those of you watching this, without naming any of them that have not made it to the public eye yet, do you have any favorite fan games or fan projects that are in no danger of being struck down by anyone? Let me know in the comments down below, and it'll be very interesting to see if we do get that rutabagas versus, I don't know, robots fan game at some point in the future. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.